Most DevOps engineers will hit $165,000 and stay there forever, not because they stopped improving, because the system was never designed to let them through. There is a number that appears in salary databases with unusual consistency. $165,000. It shows up in fintech, in healthcare infrastructure, in enterprise cloud migrations. It appears in San Francisco and Austin and Amsterdam and Singapore. And what's strange? What should have been alarming to anyone paying attention is not that the number exists. It's that almost no one goes past it. Not because the work stops being valuable, not because the engineers stop learning, but because somewhere around that compensation band, a quiet structural decision was made years ago by people who are no longer at those companies. And the decision calcified into policy, and the policy calcified into culture. And now nobody remembers it was ever a decision at all. This is how invisible ceilings are built, not with malice, with indifference. Let's go back to where this started. In the early 2010s, DevOps was not a job title. It was a philosophy, a manifesto written by engineers who were exhausted by the wall between development and operations, two tribes who shared a building and blamed each other for every outage. The promise of DevOps was continuity, shared ownership, a person who could speak both languages fluently and, in doing so, eliminate the silence between them. Companies hired these people at whatever it took. The role was new. The leverage was enormous. A single skilled DevOps engineer could compress months of deployment friction into days. They were infrastructure wizards. And for a brief window, the market treated them that way. But markets have memory, and memory has gravity. By 2016, something had shifted. Slowly, without announcement, DevOps engineers began to be classified differently inside HR systems, not as architects, not as principals, as operators. The distinction sounds administrative. It was existential. The first warning sign appeared in how job descriptions were written. Notice the language. Maintain CI/CD pipelines, support deployment workflows, assist engineering teams. The verbs had changed from building to maintaining, from designing to supporting. The role had been reframed quietly as a service function rather than a strategic one. And nobody filed a complaint because the pay was still good. The work was still interesting. The ceiling was still far enough away that most people couldn't see it yet. The second warning sign was in the career ladders that never materialized. At most organizations, software engineers had a progression: junior, mid, senior, staff, principal, distinguished. Each rung was documented. Each rung had a compensation band attached to it. DevOps engineers at these same organizations had junior, mid, senior, and then a vague gesture toward management, team lead, perhaps, or engineering managers, which required leaving the technical work entirely. The ladder didn't extend upward, it pivoted sideways off a cliff. This was documented in Slack channels, in performance review conversations, in anonymous Glassdoor posts that HR teams read and filed away. The signal was clear. It was ignored because the engineers weren't leaving yet. And in corporate systems, a problem that isn't causing attrition isn't a problem. It's a future problem. And future problems are someone else's budget cycle. The third warning sign was the hardest to see because it lived inside the engineers themselves. Around year 5 or 6 in the role, something happened to the most ambitious DevOps practitioners. They began to plateau, not in capability, but in visibility. They had automated themselves into invisibility. The pipelines ran, the deployment succeeded, the alerts stayed quiet. And in the absence of failure in the machine's perfect operation, the engineers who built and sustained it became indistinguishable from the infrastructure itself. Background: expected, unbudgeted for growth. The cruelest part: the better they were at their jobs, the less anyone noticed them doing it. And here is where the collapse begins. Not in a server room, not in a failed deployment. The collapse was slower and more total than that. It was the moment, invisible on any dashboard, when the most senior, most capable DevOps engineers quietly updated their LinkedIn profiles. Not to leave tomorrow, just to see, just to test the signal. And the market responded immediately. Competitor companies, unencumbered by the same internal classification systems, offered $195,000, $210,000 principal level titles, seats at architecture review tables. The engineers left, one by one, then in cohorts. And the systems they left behind, systems built with institutional memory, with undocumented decisions made at 2 a.m. during outages, with patterns only visible to the person who'd been watching for 3 years. Those systems began to behave unexpectedly. Incidents that should have taken minutes took days. Runbooks existed, but contained gaps only the departed engineer knew to fill. The organizations had optimized their DevOps engineers so thoroughly into background infrastructure that they had forgotten they were people, not components. You cannot git clone a human being. Here is the universal implication, and it applies far beyond DevOps. Every system that renders its most capable participants invisible will eventually be abandoned by them. Not loudly, not in protest, quietly, professionally, with 2 weeks' notice and a warm handoff document that doesn't contain half of what they actually knew. The warning signs are never secret. They are always visible, always documented, always filed somewhere, and never acted upon. The ceiling isn't invisible because it's hidden. It's invisible because looking up is uncomfortable, and discomfort is something organizations have learned to defer indefinitely until they can't.